Our previous videos have been looking at scientific management. So as we end our discussion on scientific management, let's look at some of the challenges that come with Taylor scientific management. If we are going to be focusing on the one right way to do things, and so we need to spend time coming up with the best methods. That means we're going to have to test out a number of different methods. Maybe we're going to have to time production, take videos of movements like Taylor and the Gilberts did. That can be quite expensive. The other thing as we look at with scientific management, if you are true to Taylor's version of scientific management, then you have what is called a functional foreman. That is, according to Taylor, your manager needs to be someone who knows exactly how to do your job, right? And we can appreciate as employees, I would like my leaders to know what it's like to be me in my role, right? They understand how much time it takes. They understand all the complications. I would like them to understand that process. That is very different from the perspective of another person that we've looked at. Who was that? Who said that the manager should be more of an administrator and not have that technical knowledge, right? That was Fail, who said that it was more important that they have that administrative experience than the technological know-how. Well, Taylor disagrees. He thinks that your management should be people who know the technical aspects of the job. But what further complicates this in terms of implementing scientific management is that your role may include a number of different tasks or jobs. And so, according to Taylor, you should have a functional foreman, a manager, for every task that you do. You should have a manager who knows that expertise and how to do it, which means you may have many different managers that you report to for all the different tasks that you do, which means we no longer have unity of command. I no longer report to one person because when I do this activity, I report to that person, and I report to this activity, I report to that person. So more of that matrix organizational structure that we looked at in a previous video. Scientific management, the jobs can be very monotonous, can create a toll on your mental and physical health if you're doing one sole task and you have to do it one exact way. That can be very exhausting. And it assumes that the workers are motivated solely based on pay. So the challenge, of course, with the scientific management method is that our management is deciding who is best to do the job, and we are assuming that humans are like machines, and they'll do it exactly the way that we tell them to once we figure out what that best way to do that is. So there's not really an opportunity for employee empowerment, for workers to come up with better ways to do things on their own. And so we're exploiting the worker in terms of trying to get more productivity, more out of them without more of the reward to the worker. So as we wrap up our discussion on challenges with scientific management, let's look at the issue of employee empowerment. Because the scientific management method really didn't have any employee empowerment. And as we move into the next phase, as we evolve management, there becomes that more and more important role of employee empowerment, employee engagement, which brings us to the work of Mats Alvesson. So Mats Alvesson is a Swedish management professor, and he looks at the area of functional stupidity. Functional stupidity is when you hire really smart people for your organization. So you're hiring these content experts. And those smart people, they don't do smart things. And it's not because they're not smart, but because they are discouraged to think and reflect on their own. So the idea here with functional stupidity is that the organizational structure and the organizational culture, we'll talk about that in a week or so, encourages these smart people to keep their mouths shut. So you're essentially telling your employees, don't think about what you're doing, just do it. Why are you so opposed to change? Why are you being so negative? We don't want problems, we want solutions. So just stick to your lane, do your job. We have policies, we have processes. You just need to follow those processes. Don't question what you're doing. Don't question authority. Now, of course, the benefit of functional stupidity is that we have order. We have stability, right? We run like clockwork and we get things done. But the long-term impact to the organization is that, well, you don't innovate because you don't hear from the content experts, from the people who know how to do the job, what the better ways to do the job are. So you have your management that have separated out the planning from the actual doing. And so because of that, the people who are doing aren't going to be involved necessarily in the planning, and you don't get those innovative ideas, new ways, and better ways to do things. You also get a lot of disgruntled employees because they are just do your job. You're the machine. Inputs, outputs, let's go. Don't think too critically about what you're doing or why you're doing. This can also lead to a lot of wasted material, money, and resources. So I'll put a link here to a great podcast that looks at functional stupidity with Matt Alvison. And what they're talking about, one of the hosts of the podcast talks about how he did some work with the military and particularly the Navy in terms of looking at building warships. And so when we look at organizations like military, like the Navy, what we see is that there is a lot of formalization, centralization, decisions made at the top. And because it's very much about rules and specified roles, you are basically supposed to just follow the lead of the commander. So it tends to lead to functional stupidity. That is, don't question the people that are above you, just do the job. Well, the challenge here and what they talk about in the podcast is they were making some warships and they separated out the production from the doing. So the planning versus the doing. They plan and design this warship, and then we have those who are actually going to sail it and be on it. And so they design this warship, they put in a lot of money into it, and about midway through, they're looking at the design, they've started the production, and they realize, this warship is actually not going to work. We need a ship that can be in deep water, and this ship is really built for more shallow water, for going along the coast. Well, what do we know? We know that when it comes to military or Navy conflict within the U.S., right? Where are the wars? They're not right on the U.S. border. They are across the world. We need ships that can span and travel that far. And so we put all this money, all this effort into building this warship. But if we raise our hands and say, this isn't going to work, we have to redesign it, then we have to scrap production. We have to lay people off. We've lost billions of dollars. So functional stupidity says, keep your mouth shut. Let's just keep running along, making this warship. The only downside, of course, is that at the end, we spent all this time and money and we don't actually have a ship that serves the purpose that we need to do it. So what we're seeing as management has evolved is we're seeing more encouragement for employee engagement. We need not just the planners and the doers to be separate, like we see in scientific management. Instead, we need to hear from the doers in the planning stage so that we ensure that we are have the most innovative, the most effective designs. So the challenge, of course, with functional stupidity is that we see a lack of innovation and we waste a lot of money and resources. But benefit, stability of the organization, and we just keep chugging along with what we are doing. So we start to see scientific management evolve because the problem with workers being machines that we can optimize is that the jobs are boring, the jobs are stressful, there's a lot of turnover, so people leave because who wants to do the same task every day, all day? And so as we evolve in our management theory, we move towards the era of behavioral management, where we focus on the worker's behaviors and motivations. How do we get more out of the worker? maybe the worker is motivated by more than just the paycheck. So we're going to be moving into that area of behavioral management in some coming videos. But before we do that, before we leave scientific management behind, we are going to look at financial. How do we make sure that the process and our productivity are actually giving us that bang for that buck by looking at, how do we fund our operations? And is the method that we're choosing for our operations actually making us money? So that's where we're going to be going in the next couple videos. We are going to dive a little bit deeper into emerging technology and automation before we leave this discussion on production. But to wrap up this piece here in terms of the behavioral view of management, and since that's where management is evolving after the scientific view, we've recognized we need a way to engage our employees. And so that leads us to the Pearson Revel Survey from the Robbins textbook, which is how empowered do you feel in your role? So this survey is going to measure two things. How do you feel yourself in terms of the level of empowerment that you have yourself? And then it also is going to reflect the job that you're in. Does that job allow for employee empowerment? So if we take that survey, what we find here is it identifies 5 dimensions. So the self-efficacy, self-efficacy and self-determination, those are 2 empowerments that are based on your personality. So do you have a sense of personal competence? That is, do I feel about myself that I know enough to speak out? Okay, so do I feel confident that I am one of those people who can speak out? And then self-determination, so your sense of personal choice, are you willing to speak out? So those are based on you and your personality when it comes to those scores. The other 3, personal consequences, meaning, and trust, are based on how safe you feel within your organization. So we talked before about psychological safety. We talked about people who want to be back face-to-face versus working virtually. So that psychological safety says that I feel like it is okay to speak out at work. So personal consequences. What is the impact in terms of me speaking out? Will they listen to what I say? Will it change what people do? Okay. Is there a sense of meaning, a sense of value in the assigned activities? So am I engaged at work? Are they keeping me in terms of engaged and involved? Do I feel like I have any kind of influence in this piece? And then trust. Is there a sense of security? What are the repercussions if I speak out? So when we look at those pieces, that's really going to be based on what kind of organizational culture we have, and does it create that sense of psychological safety? So I'm okay speaking out. I feel like I want to speak out because I am engaged in the organization and that I can make a difference. So those pieces are based on the organization. So whether you have a low, a normal, or a high sense of personal empowerment is going to depend both on you and how you feel about the organization that you are in.